I don't know if most of you understand the basic way salami is processed. This is something we call fermentation, meaning we use bacterial starter cultures to convert sugars into acids and other byproducts. Also in these products, we actually use a variety of cultures or living organisms that do a couple of different things. Some are protective against pathogens. Some are there to sort of break the fats down, a term that's called lipolytic, so that you get more aromatic fat in the product. And some are there actually to intensify the color. When you get very rapid drying, which is just a function of that diameter, the fermentations and a lot of the microbial activity starts to shut off relatively quickly. In this product, because the moisture level just remains naturally higher due to the fact that you have more of a barrier to moisture loss, you get much more things happening. We'll make all the salami together at one time. We'll add, if we have to add spices, we'll do that. I mean, we add different, like the fennel, that's all done. But if, let's just say we're making cacciatore and felino, there's no difference in the spice. So we could make it all in one big bucket, and then we'd stuff it, and they would go together in a room. But then the fermentation period is a period. Did I explain fermentation enough, or you guys want a little more on that? I'll give you a little more. Okay, what fermentation is taking, let's think about food groups that are fermented. Again, we go back to the ancients, because how did we preserve foods prior to refrigeration? How did you preserve milk? You fermented the milk with acid bacteria that produce acid, which coagulates it. You lose the liquid protein, which is called, I forget what the liquid protein is called. It'll come to me in a second. And you basically end up with milk proteins that are compacted and then aged. So cheese is nothing more than a milk fermentation. Grape juice. I mean, grape juice, you know, think of it this way, is nothing more than not a bacterial fermentation, but it's a yeast fermentation. So, you know, grapes, when they're picked, are somewhere between 23 and 25% sugar by weight. In the vineyard, unlike in meats, in vineyards, you have just natural yeast on grape skins. Once the grapes are crushed, those wild yeasts get in contact with all that sugar. They convert the sugar to alcohol and other byproducts. In the case of meat, you'll always see a little carbohydrate or a type of sugar added to meat, and that's to assist the bacteria to produce acids and other byproducts. So fermentation is basically a living process to convert sugars primarily to acids, or it can be, in the case of wine, it's alcohol and CO2. So fermentation is a living process to convert sugars primarily to either alcohol or to acids. In the case of meats, you know, meats are very liable to spoilage. They're very dense in nutrients. That's why fresh meat spoils so rapidly. Lean meat's about 70% water. So a fermentation where you get acid production immediately sort of changes the geography, and the normal spoilage organisms, when they're now in the presence of salt that you add, plus acid, can't grow anymore. And you get more, the geology sort of focuses more towards acid producers or fermenters, and those are the ones in nature that will predominate and therefore preserve it. You know, salami will spend, our aging temperature is around 55 to 58 degrees. So recognize the product sitting a little below room temperature for weeks and weeks on end. Normal fermentations are around 75 degrees Fahrenheit, typically. All the products here are made with natural casein. Now, you have to think about caseins kind of in the same way. We'll go back to the wine analogy, that a winemaker would do barrel selection. If you go to Piemonte, where they have the Barolos, the old style of making Barolo there is use these gigantic Hungarian barrels. So you have a tremendous volume of wine to a small surface area of wood, okay? And so the impact of wood in that style of winemaking is fairly neutral. If you take even an American oak barrel, standard barrel, and heavy toast that barrel, the impact of that barrel on the wine in that barrel is going to be highly significant. In these products here, and there's some here that you don't have on your tasting panel, the caseins actually have a character and a flavor component all on their own. Some of the caseins are fairly neutral. So on the cacciatore, for instance, this is the, not to get too graphic, this is part of the small intestine, the small, thin casing. It's the standard casings used typically on hot dogs and lots of fresh sausage. This casing is very light. and very neutral. So the impact of the casing on the flavor in the salami here is neutral. When you move into a product you don't have on your tasting panel, Crespone, this for instance, I don't know if any of you are wine drinkers or particularly red Burgundy drinkers from France, but if you've ever had a very old style red Burgundy, they get a little bit on the animal side, a little bit on the barnyard side. This has got kind of a barnyard quality to it. So if you like earthy kinds of barnyard sort of flavors, it's very evident in Crespone. You don't have it here because it's a chore to kind of peel it. Now this one's being served with the mold on, and we didn't talk too much about molds. Just a brief mention. When salami ages like this, we don't use any antioxidants in salami to protect the fats. And all of you know that cook, olive oil, butters, and fats readily oxidize. They get somewhat rancid. They're very liable to absorb lots of odors. With mold on a salami, mold is basically a natural protection against oxygen damage to the fats. And the mold really serves as a protection against oxidative rancidity in a salami. Now, in this particular product, you have a small, if I can hold this up, a small sausage relative to casing with a lot of mold. So here you're getting, this would be almost like eating the Camembert cheese of salamis, meaning that the influence of mold here and taste on this product is significant. And the only reason why you can pick this up is that the spice levels here are very low. Just again to repeat myself, the basic spice, salt, pepper, fresh garlic that's used to make this line of products is all the same. We don't vary it at all. The only variation here is the addition of fennel for the finocchione or the truffles and the truffle salami. So let's start first with cacciatore. Cacciatore means hunter in Italian. This is a product that's been around for many, many years. Its attributes are that it should be fairly sweet. Sweetness is probably, you can start eating now. Sweetness is the character you look for. You can see when you look at this salami, and a good salami has very, very nice cut. It's clean. Clean meaning if you look, there's no sinew here, relatively no sinew at all. Recognize that all muscles have a certain amount of connective tissue in them, so somebody had to do a lot of work in order to get a salami that's like this. When you look at Felino, and I think some of this, again, goes back to the casing. The Felino casing is a particularly thick casing, which means that for the diameter of the product, it loses moisture very, very slowly. In this little cacciatore is at 40% shrinkage in 3 weeks. For this Felino, this is 35%, and this takes about 35 to 40 days. So it is bigger in diameter, but it's not double the diameter, but it's almost twice the time. So what that means is with higher moisture, there are more enzymatic, more complexity, more things can happen in this salami that can ever happen in a cacciatore. The finocchione originally has its home in Tuscany. That's where it was originally made. So again, the base spice is the same. The last item here is the truffle salami. It's basically the cacciatore with truffles in it. The only little secret here, which I'm not going to share with you, is truffles, when they're at room temperature, typically do not have a lot of aroma to them. Normally, if you go out and you have, of course, the fall season is the season for truffles in Italy and here. Normally, they'll shave truffles on a hot pasta dish of some kind. You need the heat to get the truffles to give off their aroma. Of course, this is not a cooked product, and we don't heat it typically. So the question is, how do you get these aromatic truffle flavors at room temperature? The small diameters, you can go thicker because you're biting into something that's a little bit smaller just in its mass. When you get out to big diameter products, sometimes we've taken them and basically cut them in pie shapes. It's kind of fun to do that. It would be difficult to eat a large, like a 6-inch diameter salami that's very thickly cut. So I would say that normal rule of thumb is, as the diameter increases, the slice thickness decreases. As the diameter decreases, the slice thickness can increase. For great salumi, just like for great wine, there's no great wine coming from a mediocre vineyard. There's no great salumi coming from mediocre meats. That's probably there's one thing I want you to leave with today. That's the thing I want you to leave with.